Welcome to the Chaplain's Assistance Motorpod, and I am your host, Gary. And here is the podcast where every 2 weeks, thereabouts, we discuss my world of G.I. Joe and take a look at something that I found in a box underneath a bunch of other boxes in my basement, my pit, my mess, as my wife likes to call it. And today, take a look a little bit back on 2021 and look a little ahead into 2022 and what I'm going to be looking forward to doing and collecting this year. And to start off with, the past couple weeks have really been about me getting my basement finally organized. I was able to have 3 days off after the Christmas holiday. With those 3 days, I was able to get some time to clean and sort my basement. And it really stemmed from having some days off that my wife didn't have, and I had to look after my son. And my son really was interested in getting some painting done. Of course, he wants me to paint his room a shade of blue and orange and yellow and red and purple and green and you name it. And I said, hey, I do have a painting project that I would love to have your help on. So of course that got him all excited, but what he didn't like was the fact that it required a little work before the paint, and managing the expectations of a 6-year-old is tricky at times. After a couple days, it finally got to the point where he was a tremendous help in picking toys up and putting them in the designated boxes. Or in this case, he was actually picking up the boxes and I was putting the toys in them. I have some boxes that are labeled from 1983 through 1990. So with finding stuff off my quote-unquote workbench, I was able to finally clean it off for the first time in over a year since I built it. The whole goal was cleaning this off and getting all the toys off of it, was to finally start painting it and finally start making it my display centerpiece for my G.I. Joe toys. Also, by picking up everything, and it was a lot. There was actually, not surprisingly disorganized, but I was able to compact it quite a bit and start making sense of things. And, oh, maybe it's time I take care of that, and let's get rid of that. And let's put this over here and that over there. And it made a ton of room. Granted, everything's piled on top of each other and I can't get easy access to some stuff, but overall, I was able to accomplish really what I wanted to accomplish what I wanted to get done over my holiday break. And that was clean off the table and start painting it. He did help me clean it off, got bored of that, went upstairs, watched TV, and left me alone. But then when we went to the store, we got some blue paint and bought a quart, and I went to Home Depot, and Bear has this line of marquee paint, which is like, oh, paint and primer in one. It took me almost the entire quart, and the quart, and it says on the can, oh, it'll cover up to 105 square feet. And a sheet of plywood's 32. And with the edging and stuff, I'm thinking it's probably like 35, 36 square feet. It took 2 coats. The wood just soaked all the paint up. I had some brown paint that I found at Home Depot's Oops area where where people we don't really like this color. And so I have a gallon of that. And I was able to paint, so it's 2 stories where it's like 3 sections in between, so it's about 42 inches tall off the casters that are on the floor, and in the in-between areas I got some other areas I'm building up for display, and one of them I kind of wanted a dirt sand feel, so I had some brown paint that I picked up, and I let my son help me paint that area. I taped it off where I want to do it because it's going to be a kind of a 2 or 3 tone. Haven't figured out if I'm going to go with the full 3 tone, but I definitely have the dirt or brown on the bottom with a sky blue that's going to be above that. and then maybe a black at top for the night sky or space, so you can imagine what's going there. And haven't gotten that far, but he got the brown done. So he was painting the brown and I'm painting the blue. And then he'd be like, I wanted to paint the blue. So it's, you give him the roller and you let him, okay, paint the blue. And try not to, get any droplets, but he did. And overall, it was a smashing success. And it's starting to take shape. And I just got to get some more paint. And I got to do it quickly before it turns into a workbench again, because it's an empty shelf in an otherwise unorganized room becomes quickly a catch-all, especially as the Christmas season's over and my wife's moving everything back down into the basement. But she's really good at that, but a lot of times it's really me that says, I want to get this out because I want to take a picture of it or something else, and then it just goes on down. So that was the big thing that I'm most excited that got done. And then the other thing, right before the new year, was I found more parts for the G.I. Joe hammer. I have some buckets or like little box. It was this little plastic nail bucket that had a whole bunch of spare missiles and stuff in it. And I'm moving things around. And then I found it. I'm like looking through it. And I was like, hey, wait, those are hammer parts. And I just went through my 3 hammers. I'm doing this. I find it right after I bought a 4th hammer on Mercari, which I got for what I felt was a good deal, because it had the last couple pieces I needed to complete the one that I had at that point. I dig through this bucket with the hammer parts and thunderclap missiles and annihilator balls, and there it was, the rest of the pieces unbroken. And it was just like, you got to be kidding me. Gather everything I got, go over, and then for the first time I have a complete unbroken G.I. Joe hammer, the most fragile, by far the most fragile G.I. Joe vehicle ever made, or at least the most fragile G.I. Joe vehicle I've ever handled. It's fine. I got a 4th one. I'm going to have to take my lumps on the taxes and sell it and just recoup my money. Wasn't initially bought as to resell, but I only really want to have a play hammer and a display hammer. And actually, I don't even know if I want to play hammer, because I have the Brawler from 2002, G.I. Joe versus Cobra, Valor versus Venom, Spy Troops era, New Sculpt era that I did. But really excited that the hammer is finally one more project I can move on from, and really want to take a closer look at it in the near future. It's a wonderful, terrific G.I. Joe representation of a Humvee, and that's where I'm going to leave that. But it was kind of funny. It's like the day I was just, I'm just going to buy the last parts I needed. Good deal, blah, 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 blah. And then next thing you know, I'm moving everything around. I'm like, oh my God, there it is. And that's just usually the way it happens. You don't find what you need until after you buy the replacements. Very familiar with that experience in my life. So that's what closed out 2021 for me. I thought about talking about, what I really enjoyed this year from a collecting standpoint, and from a favorite issue this year, standout issue, even though it was a rather recent, was I really did enjoy G.I. Joe 286 about Storm Shadow. I felt that was probably the strongest one. Even if it wasn't like critically the best issue, it was the one that I most enjoyed. I'm kind of done collecting G.I. Joe back issues. I don't really have anything I'm looking for. I've had or read them all. And if I don't currently have in my collection, I made a personal choice that I didn't need it. Shining example, G.I. Joe Special number 1. I had it and I wasn't impressed enough to keep it. However, I do look for back issues for other comic books, and my best get to brag was Charlton Fightin' 5 number 41, and it's a special issue, not only because I was trying to complete a Fightin' 5 run at the suggestion of Twitter friend at Big Five Army, or Kirk Spencer. I was trying to get the whole run of Fightin' 5, the original issues. They ran from 28 to 41, all first printings, because after issue 42 it becomes reprinting from 28, and I slept on it for a long time. And issue 40 is the first appearance of DC Comics character through acquisition, Peacemaker. So I was at the flea market several months ago, and I managed to score that issue for 50% off, from $25 for $12 and $1 for parking. So for $13, I was able to snag a mid-grade copy of Peacemaker's second appearance and put me within one issue of completing the Fight and Five collection that I was putting off until after the Suicide Squad movie was announced by James Gunn. So that was a cool get. Action figure wise, for 2021, my favorite action figure to come out in 6-inch scale was the Swarm Trooper by Valaverse and Action Force. For all the reasons are, the thing is a next level troop builder, and with the gear pack, I am on board with that, and it was awesome. It is an awesome action figure. And for best 6-inch G.I. Joe was the color changing Zartan, and I think I like these the most out of the 6-inch collection that I've gotten so far, because they're still toys in some way. You know, everything seems to be 6-inch wise is more of a collector's item. I know that recently Hasbro just announced a limited articulation 6-inch line in the classified aesthetic, which I'm not interested in. But these 6-inch figures, for me, the Swarm Trooper and Zartan, color changing Zartan, are the most toyetic, because they have something going on. It isn't just a straight army man. You know, I give Zartan props for actually going back to that original color changing action, because individual toys need a hook, and it has that for me, that 6-inch figure. 4-inch wise, I was having a hard time. I had two 4-inch figures that I really enjoyed this year from the Hasbro Walmart Retro, quote unquote, 4-inch collection, and that was Stalker. I'm really getting a kick out of the Stalker. I think the head sculpt is fantastic, and then the legs are more like a classified series legs with the mid-thigh swivel, and the lower legs have the boot swivel. That is pretty cool. It's just missing a double hinged elbow, and it would just be a 4-inch 6-inch figure, which I would then say, why the heck are you even go back to 4-inch? But then Scarlet from the Retro line, which was made in limited quantities, but is absolutely the best head sculpt we've ever gotten on a Scarlet. But she still has the limited articulation like a G.I. Joe modern figure. If I have to choose between the two, which one? I'm still going to go with Scarlet. I think Scarlet takes the win on the 4-inch front. You know, and that's pretty much what I've gotten the most enjoyment out of this year for collecting wise, out of new stuff. Old stuff, I'm going to stand by the finishing the hammer is my favorite accomplishment for my vintage collection, and even with the acquisitions I've gotten, I'm most proud of getting the hammer out of the way. Now moving into like 2022, you know, some resolutions to make a permanent time for me to record the podcast and to take some better notes before I go on air and get some things squared away in my head first. Maybe it'll help me out with the editing time, which editing seems to be, well, I actually enjoy the edit. It's almost cathartic, but doing the prep work beforehand, the episode is sometimes I skimp a little too much on that, and then I have to fill it out, and then I edit it out. A little work on the front end saves a lot of work on the back end, and I'm doing too much on the back end because I'm not doing enough on the front end. So that's my main goal this year for the podcast, and also finish my display for my flag. That's 21 and 22 going on in a nutshell. What's going on? One thing that I have had in mind to talk about for a while was in a little box of mine that I've moved probably about 5 or 6 times, and it was most recently on a shelf where my wife's Christmas decorations are supposed to go, is the Cobra Night Landing from 1985. Now, the Cobra Night Landing is essentially a Zodiac Milpro inflatable tactical raft, very similar to what is used in the Navy SEALs. As a matter of fact, this toy would be remolded and reused several times in the modern era, and notably 1997 being used as this for the SEAL team with torpedo, coming with torpedo, and also is part of the 50th anniversary, being part of the Danger at the Dock set. Now, the Cobra Night Landing, there's a couple cool features with it. Number one, the box, while this is a 1985 toy, it did have Firefly from 1984 on the cover of it, piloting the boat. And it's very reminiscent, of a special ops team is riding this into, or being an insertion team. So Cobra having it for their saboteur, Firefly, makes absolute sense on the box art. And Firefly is just an epic character that I'm loving more and more as I'm getting older. Maybe because it's a little bit of the Boba Fett effect. And that is the fact that he didn't really do a lot, so we've built up stories of him in our heads. Or maybe it's because I got into G.I. Joe right about the time that he joined Ninja Force in issue 126. But you flip the box over on the back, and I'm using 3D Joe's as my resource because I do not have a box for it. And I can't recommend 3D Joe's enough, as its creator Carson Metaxas is really working super, super hard on making it the new definitive resource now that Yo Joe is out of the hands of the fans. And with the Night Landing, there's a ton of detail and accessories that come with it that, while it's a vehicle, it's also like a little bit of a mini playset. So I'm just going to read the box contains. The box contains raft top and bottoms, 2 oars, a cannon, 2 outboard motor halves, a prop, a radio, a knife, a machine gun, shovel, label sheet, G.I. Joe folder, instructions, and blueprints. Let's think about this for a second. It came with a shovel. And it is a shovel, not an entrenching tool. It would have been cooler if it was an entrenching tool, but let's not go there. Like in the comic books that I read, and then we also know from, special ops teams, is they land on a beach, they dig a hole, and they bury it to cover their tracks. You have that. That, to me, that makes it more of a playset than a vehicle, but it adds to the vehicle, making it a playset in itself. Perfect for a diorama. It comes with a machine gun, and the funny thing is, I'm looking at the machine gun now. It's the same machine gun that came with it's same as the second machine gun that just came with the Retro Stalker. It's that World War II grease gun, like the 40 cal that was, and even the mobsters used. It's just nice to get an extra gun with the raft. It also comes with a radio, so you got a little shortwave radio, which for the 1980s is representative of the technology at the time, because obviously now with satellite phones you don't need a huge radio, but maybe you do want a huge radio because maybe it works on frequencies that aren't jammed. The last thing is it comes with an entrenching knife, and the knife is something that is the most often lost, but the machine guns get lost and the shovels get lost, and not so much the rays. The rays are a little bit bigger. But there's also an easily removable cannon that mounts to the front of the Night Landing. And as far as cannon goes, it's really just another form of automatic rifle. And that's fine by me. We don't need to call it a cannon. Probably something in the 30 caliber range, has a magazine. But it's fired like a machine gun without a buttstock. So this isn't a hand-carried machine gun that's been mounted on a post. This is actually was designed to be mounted in the raft. You have your oars, and something that isn't mentioned on the box, especially with the outboard motor, is the outboard motor has a tiller. And it's a little piece of plastic. It sticks out. It doesn't often fall out, but they do. I had one where it did fall out, and I went back to the seller several years ago. I'm like, hey, it's missing the tiller for the motor. And sure enough, he went digging through his loose stuff, and he's like, oh, I didn't realize that was part of it. And as I'm looking at the picture of the box on 3D Joe's, you might miss it at first glance. The rest of the boat is molded in blue, and it has, the red 878 decal in the same style as the 788 on the Hiss tanks. You have the red Cobra sticker. You have other stickers all around it. It has those old black stickers that don't show up for crap on that deep Cobra blue, but they're there. And you got these weird blue stickers that go on the oars. I'm not sure what's up with that, but hey, every little bit helps. Overall, you have some wood on the bottom of the raft, giving it the sense of the quote-unquote boatiness of this, where it's kind of like a rowboat. You have the wood floor, and then you have the wood planks that you would sit on, and you have two of those. And molded into is the rope or the line, not rope. If you're on a boat, it's a line that's going through the D-rings all around the raft. It is such a nice little touch to make this more interesting than just, they could have made this simpler and gotten the same toyness across. So it's for play, it would have been just fine, but adding these details take this from just a toy to being a toy and a diorama piece, which I truly enjoy out of this. Now, the outboard motor, to go back to that again real quick, on the Devilfish, the top of the outboard motor comes off, and you can see the inner workings of the motor. Here, that doesn't happen. You take the top of the outboard motor off, you're going to lose your tiller. And when you go down, you have the prop that spins by your fingers. It not self-winding. And it stops just short of being lower than the bottom of the Night Landing craft. So it's good when I was a kid, I had a blue carpet. It would have been perfect on that. I did not have this as a kid. I found a couple of these through local sales, and then I bought another one because I forgot that I bought them. This would have been perfect as a kid to play with, and you don't need water, but it absolutely is a fun water toy to play with as well. Before I go into rating it, I'm going to try to go into the crewing it first. Try to start doing that right this year. Who crews the Cobra Night Landing? Obviously, as the picture suggests, it's awesome for Firefly. Also, it is, because it's such a good team insertion boat, the eels, the version 1 eels from 1985, terrific, perfect choice for this. But if you have any Cobra character that needs to sneakily insert themselves into a situation via water, this is not out of place. There's very few characters I wouldn't put in on this. For example, Cobra Commander. I wouldn't put Serpentor. Probably not Mindbender. But you could put a team of Vipers in here, Cobra Soldiers, Cobra Officers, anything in that more traditional military sense would work very well with this. And you could even do Destro or his Iron Grenadiers. The Cobra Night Landing is a very useful vehicle for a bunch of different figures. The Hydro Viper wouldn't look out of place on this. And for a lot of people that might be pushing it a little bit, but when I say Cobra Eel, I say 1985. I'm not saying you put the Cobra Eel from 1992 or 1993 on it. At that point, the bright yellow might not work with it. In summary, this thing's awesome, and I have 3 of them, and 2 of them are complete. My third one is missing the entrenching knife, and I'm fine with that, because if I'm going to be using this, if I'm playing with it, I'm not going to be using the accessories, because obviously they're going to get lost. But displaying it, I don't even know if I would use all the accessories displaying it. If I built a diorama with sand and I was burying this in the sand after landing on a beach, could be using the shovel, having another member of the team using the radio, and you have the submachine gun for the fact that Cobra eels only come with a spear gun. So the submachine gun is a welcome addition as well. On a rating of 0 to 5 oars in the water, I'm going to give this a 4.5 oars out of 5. This is a near perfect vehicle. There's very little I would change personally. If anything, if you're looking to make this a step above, I would make the cover for the engine come off, and maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to come up with like a wind mechanism for the prop, and a way to also make it go into water. So if you wanted to put this in a bathtub or a stream, you could do that. Other than that, this thing is just near perfect. It was a wonderful addition to the line. Then it has held up exceptionally well. I think everybody who has a G.I. Joe collection should have one. These guys got to get anywhere, somewhere, somehow. And this is absolutely one way for Cobra to get into a situation and create chaos and mayhem. And I love it. So that brings us to the end of another episode of the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod. I have been your host, Gary. I can be found on Twitter and Instagram at Chaplain Joe Pod. You can search for Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod on Facebook. And I can also be reached via email, chaplainjoepod@gmail.com. The Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod is the strange, but not as strange, little brother of the Pint of Comics broadcasting family. They can be found at pintocomics.com for all their relevant information, and also when they're not lighting off fireworks laid around by Firefly. You can find the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod wherever you find good podcasts, like Anchor FM, our host, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and other podcatching platforms. And with all of that out of the way, I have 2 more missiles for the masses. The first one is, please recycle, and also, be decent to each other. See ya.